Wow. Tough act to follow. They drew a circle and shut me out, a heretic, a rebel, a thing to flout. But love and I had the wit to win. We drew a circle and took them in. Good morning and welcome. Please stand as you're willing and able and join us in singing our opening hymn.
Keep your heart wide open. Through the waves want to push you around. Got to keep your heart wide open till your faith brings you back to solid ground. Keep your arms wide open, though the waves want to push you around. You've got to keep your arms wide open till your faith brings you back to solid ground. Keep your eyes wide open, though the waves want to push you around. Got to keep your eyes wide open till your faith brings you back to solid ground. Keep your love wide open, though the waves want to push you around. You've got to keep your love wide open till your faith brings you back to solid ground. Keep your love wide open, though your waves want to push you around. You've got to keep your love wide open till your faith brings you back to solid ground.
So welcome to the Unitarian Church of Baton Rouge. I looked up the words to that opening introit. We all laugh, we all cry, we all feel hunger, we all feel pain, we all love, we all hate, we all hope, and we all dream. We are one world and one people. Am I right? Good, look at me. Welcome to the Unitarian Church. My name is Nathan. I'm one of your ministers. I'm so pleased to welcome you today. During middle hour, online people, welcome also if you're local and you want to come during middle hour. In room 6, we're having a class on flags and chalices. So if you want to know about all of the flags that you may see in the church and the chalice, Kathy, correct? Go to room 6. In room 7 is the social justice sub-team on voting. You may not know this, but there's a thing happening in about 10 days. So the social justice team, I believe, is focused on making sure people have access to the right to vote and that voter turnout is high. Correct? Good. All right, look at me. I know everything so far. I want to also thank, we had 30 volunteers last night and more than 100 people come to our Halloween party. So thank you if you were any of those. And then on the 9th at 7 o'clock, the 6th Source Sharing Circle is Did I get it right? No. Sixth source sharing circle. Sometimes people in this church create groups just to make me have tongue issues. Anyway, they are having a Samhain service at 7 o'clock on the 9th. 7 o'clock on the 9th. That is open to everybody. Anyway, it is good to be together in church. Would you join me in this morning's prayer and reflection? The God that we know when we see hope and love, mystery named and unnamed, believed in and not, whatever it is that holds us together. Hold us today as we are dreaming of a new future, as we are being grateful for a world that has passed, as we are hopeful for what will come, and as we are grieving those we've lost. Help us to be a people of open minds and open hearts. Help us to love beyond any belief or any ideology. Help us to make space here for our place in this great arc of justice and of the universe. May you know peace. May you know love. Amen. We have 3 cards today. One of them is for Thinking of You for Eileen Hendricks, and another is for Sarah Roundtree, who is recovering from scheduled surgery. And also, if you would place a stone, after a long, I don't like the word battle, but after cancer for a long time and then being on hospice, Julie Ruckstill died on Friday, and so we're placing a stone for her. There will be a memorial service at some point. Right now, the family is, they're just in the early stages of grief. This ritual we have is open to everybody, visitor and member, and online alike. We invite you to come forward either along the west or the east wall, take a stone, let it represent whatever's on your heart or your mind, and place it in the chalice bowl. Online, type it right into the chat. We now invite those who wish to come forward as we place stones. And we say together, with hope to make this a better world, we light this flame. Its light is the symbol of the power of love.
From all that dwell below the skies, let songs of hope and faith arise. Let peace, goodwill on earth be sung, through every land, by every tongue.
This is Halloween Sunday, and it's one of my favorite Sundays of the year. We've done like a zombie service and a ghost story service and all sorts of really fun stuff. And I really wanted to do that with you today, but we're not.
if that's okay. Here's what is going on. Next week at Emerson Unitarian Universalist Church in Houston, you don't need to know where it is, but there's a church in Houston, Texas that is installing their new senior minister, and they've asked me to give the sermon during that installation, which is, if you've done this a lot, it's not a big deal, but for those of us who are just regular ministers, it's a pretty big deal. And so what I would like to do today is a little different than what we normally do, which is I would like to preach what I think I'm going to preach next week today. Does that make sense? So here's how it's going to be a little different. Let me kind of describe out how an installation service usually goes. Who's been to an installation or an ordination? Oh, look at us. We need to install and ordain more ministers. So what happens is everyone gathers in. There's clergy from all over the place, and it's like a big... When I was ordained, y'all called it my coronation. Like, it's got a little bit of that feeling to it. So all the ministers come in, and then there's the welcomes from different groups and all of this, and the whole congregation is gathered, and they're excited. They're beginning the new chapter. And in the middle of the service is the sermon. So there's usually music on either side of it. And right after the sermon, that is where they then have the act of either installation or ordination, where they install or ordain the person. And then they have like 5 or 6 extra ministers come up and do different charges, like a charge to the minister, a charge to the congregation, charge to children and youth, the laying on of hands. And all of those are supposed to be like 2 minutes long, but they told ministers 2 minutes. So they're all like 7 or 8 minutes, and this is... right? We clocked all of the services we've had here. None went under an hour and a half. So the piece that I was asked to do is right in the center. And it's awkward for me because we were experimenting with this before the shutdowns. But for me, I preach better when I take whatever is here and I split it into 3 or 4 different chunks. And that's why we have the sermon in these different parts. I think it helps with digestion on your part and helps with me processing my own. It's a better preaching style for me. But that's not what they do at an installation. So what we're going to do is we're going to have just a few elements here at the beginning, and then we are going to go into Nathan talking way too long. So we have lots of manipulatives back there. It's designed for kids, but it's really for anyone. If you need to sit through. Also, I scared Lee about this. This is how thick the sermon is. Hang on. 16-point font, double-spaced, and we forgot to switch out the cardstock. So it is the sturdiest sermon you'll ever hear, but it is not this thick. Good? So... the next hymn we're going to do is our hymn of the month, and the reason we picked it is because there's an election coming up, and you're probably holding a lot of stress on your shoulders. So let's just let it go as we go in today, right where you're seated. Let's sing this hymn.
Loosen, loosen, baby, you don't have to carry the weight of the world in your muscles and bones. Let go, let go, let go. Oh, baby, you don't have to carry of the world in your muscles and bones. Let go, let go, let go. Holy breath and holy name, will you ease the pain? And holy name, will you ease the pain? innocent baby. You don't have to carry the weight of the world in your muscles and bones. Let go, let go, let go.
So here is what I need from you today. I would like to actually hear your feedback on the sermon, sort of. In the process of worship is an emotional process. It's designed to tap you into places that may be untended. So immediate responses are not necessarily useful. So I don't, after the service, other than the regular way you would engage, I don't necessarily want feedback then. Because you may feel a certain way 10 minutes. Have you ever watched a movie and it's like a really good movie and then 10 minutes later you've forgotten it? And do you know what I mean? And there may be another movie where you're like, but it keeps coming back to you over and over. I would love feedback for how this sermon feels to you on Tuesday or on Wednesday. Only if you feel up to sharing it, but not like immediately after. Does that make sense? The other thing that I would like to share is the board has passed their annual vision of ministry, and I wanted to read it to you, and then we'll do the offering. So as a reminder, this is a little convoluted, but stick with me because we don't have the 3 sermon parts. I have time to do this. You elect a board. So the congregation in our church is at the top, and you have picked a board, and you have told that board, go run the church. The board has delegated to their ministry team leader, who also happens to be the senior minister. Good so far? They've said to the ministry team leader, here is our annual vision of ministry. We want you, me, to go make these 3 things happen. You can do it all yourself. You can hire people to do it so long as you stay within the budget the congregation approved. You can have volunteers do it. We don't care how you do it. Just don't break our rules because the board has policies, and then just go do it. Does that make sense? So every year they have one of these, and the staff is held accountable to these, and this is how I report to the board. So I would like you to hear what your board has said their annual vision of ministry is for this upcoming year. These are also not necessarily attainable or measurable goals, okay? So it's not, we expect to have 13 new hymnals in the sanctuary by end of year. These are, if we did our job well as a church, this is what it would be like. Does that make sense? All right. 1 is to provide a spiritual home that is safe and full of hope for all who need this refuge. 2 is to remove the walls, barriers, and oppressions that prevent and obstruct engagement and inclusion. 3, help our congregants to develop the spiritual tools they need to survive and thrive in this world. That is what we are going to be spending our year working on. Let me read them again, since it's an entire year focus. 1, provide a spiritual home that is safe and full of hope for all who need this refuge. 2, remove the walls, barriers, and oppressions that prevent and obstruct engagement and inclusion. And 3, help our congregants to develop the spiritual tools they need to survive and thrive in this world. The whole month of October, we are sharing our offering with the Parole Project in Baton Rouge. This is the last Sunday of the month, and so Lee, did we agree to span it through the election, or did we change it? Nope. All right, so this is it. This is it. Online people, the 9 o'clock people, they've been saying that you're not giving your fair share. Now, I don't know why they're saying that, because they don't know how much you give. But right now, online people, this is your chance. And I happen to know that there's someone here who has $50,000 they're about to put in the offering basket. I don't know how I know that, but we need you, online people, to go ahead and give a lot. Because they're always saying here at the 9 o'clock service, we feel like we're carrying the weight of the online people. I tell them that's kind of weird, and usually you are the online people who are here when you're not here, on a Sunday, but that's what they did. So with that, I will ask you to give very generously In-person people, do you know what the online people just said over the chat about you? They said there's no way you can match the $100,000 they're going to give to the Parole Project right now. I've got it pulled up right here somewhere. I'm reading the chat. That's what they said. Anyway. I ask the ushers to come forward as this morning's offering is gratefully given and received. Two last things about this thing I'm going to do in a minute. One is I pulled some elements from previous sermons and also some elements that are about to come into some sermons. So this is like a pre and post clip show of some old sitcom from the 80s. So just stick with that. And when we put the order of service together, I like to end the service that matches the hymn that everyone's going to be singing afterwards. So I crafted the end of the order of service to be the hymn I'll Fly Away, which we did just a few weeks ago. Well, they changed their closing hymn, or their hymn after the sermon. So I changed the sermon. So the end of the sermon is not going to match the closing hymn we're doing, but I love that hymn so much, we're just going to do it. Good? All right. So let's go ahead and now we're entering into, we've had all the ministers come in and all of this, and they've done welcomes and greetings and child sightings and all this stuff. And so then in the actual installation, we're going to have this hymn and then the reading and then the sermon. So would you all rise if your body lets you and sing this next hymn?
I know
A seed knows how to wait. Most seeds wait for several years before starting to grow. A cherry seed can wait for 100 years with no problem. What exactly each seed is waiting for is known only to that seed. Some unique trigger combination of temperature, moisture, light, and many other things is required to convince a seed to jump off the deep end and take its chance, to take its one and only chance to grow. A seed is alive while it waits. Every acorn on the ground is just as alive as the 300-year-old oak tree that towers over it. Neither the seed nor the old oak is growing. They're both just waiting. Their waiting differs, however, in that the seed is waiting to flourish while the old tree is just waiting to die. When you go into a forest, you probably tend to look up at the plants that have grown so much taller than you ever could. You probably don't look down, where just beneath your single footprint sits 101,000 seeds, each one alive and waiting. When you're in the forest, for every tree that you see, there are no less than 3 million more trees in the soil, fervently wishing to be. When the embryo within a seed starts to grow, it basically just stretches out its doubled over waiting posture, elongating into official ownership of the form that it assumed years ago. The hard coat that surrounds a peach seed, a sesame or mustard seed, or a walnut's shell mostly exists to prevent this expansion. In the laboratory, we simply scratch the hard coat and add a little water, and it's enough to make almost any seed grow. I must have cracked thousands of seeds over the years, and yet the next day's green never fails to amaze me. Something so hard can be so easy if you just have a little help. In the right place, under the right conditions, you can finally stretch out into what you're supposed to be. Each beginning is the end of a waiting. We are each given exactly one chance to be. Each of us is both impossible and inevitable. Every replete tree was first a seed that waited.
So I've never been great at taking care of plants. So I surround myself with plants that do not need a particular amount of care. We have azaleas all over this city. First few freezes that I had, I covered my azaleas to protect them. And I noticed none of my neighbors did the same. Until I realized you didn't need to do that. They're perfectly adapted for this climate. It's a set it and forget it kind of plant. So I have like I had 8 azalea bushes in front of my house. And last summer, in the middle of August, we had a major drought. They're not going to remember that, but you probably will. In this time of perpetual weather disasters, it becomes easy to lose track of which trauma happens at which point. And in the scope of my life, one of the least important things for me to pay attention to was the state of those azaleas. But because of that blistering heat, I believe we went almost 60 days without it going below 80 degrees. Do you remember that? Well, the azaleas started to dry up. The leaves got brown and crispy. And at the end of the summer, 3 of my azalea plants had died. Droughts in July in Louisiana are not normal. Every day in the summer, we have that blast of Gulf moisture that creates pop-up showers, and azaleas are cultivated to grow and to thrive and to survive where we live. But because of our changing climate, these azaleas died in these new normal circumstances. When Ed, that's the minister there, reached out to me a couple of months ago to preach at his installation, I was stuck. He said he wanted me to cast a new vision for Unitarian Universalism. Specifically, he wanted me to craft this sermon for hope. This is hard because the minister's job is to cultivate hope even where it can be hard to find hope. And I've been having a hard time finding hope lately. My congregation, I'm speaking on behalf of you, is struggling with the same thing right now. Our board just released their annual vision of ministry. This is the vision that the staff are asked to carry out over the year. And this vision includes, did you catch this? The words refuge, safety, hope, and survival. I had to convince them the board convinced themselves, but the original third annual vision of ministry did not have the word thrive. It just said the spiritual tools to help us survive here. I stopped the board in the discussion of the AVOM and I said, "Are you okay?" Do you know what they said? No, we're not. And I asked them to think about how they would feel after the election, if that may change the way, if they're so sort of feeling trapped by the state of this election, that maybe after they would feel differently. And they said no. They were clear that the state of the world transcends who becomes president in the next few weeks. Part of that is because of the current y'all are feeling this? Part of that is the cultural climate here in Louisiana is going to be quite oppressive, regardless of who is president. On top of that, the unfolding realities of climate change for the state make it hard to find hope sort of abound everywhere. So when Ed asked me to share this message with them, with you, I struggled because I am looking for hope probably as much as you are. So I decided to title my sermon Unitarian Universalism After the Azaleas Died. Let me tell you a little about myself. I'll kind of go this one fast. I was raised in the greater New Orleans area. By Houston standards, I was raised in the spring or the woodlands of Houston. Does that make sense to anyone who's got Houston ties? Okay, good. For those who don't know me, I was raised in Slidell, which is, for you to know, the spring or the woodlands of New Orleans. I heard my call to the ministry as a high school youth at rallies that churches would host in the mid to late 90s. Pieces of my ministerial call manifested while I was on the Emerson campus back in my teenage years. I married a woman who was from Texas that we met during going to youth events. In fact, she's the reason I spent almost a decade in Texas. Ed and I went to seminary. There's about a paragraph about why I like Ed and how I'm going to convince the church to like him because I went to seminary with him. That's not super relevant for you, but if you want to find out why I like Ed, I'll tell you later. Also, that's one of the things that ministers do, right? Like, you bring in a minister, and then the other ministers tell you why you got someone good, and they got someone good. Oh, hang on. Emerson people, don't watch this. If you're watching this, turn it off and wait until it's actually happening. It's like opening your birthday present a day early, something. Good? All right, let's continue. So when Ed asked me to preach here at their church, the church that I knew for more than 20 years, I struggled to figure out how I could bring hope. But if you look at that reading that Don shared, I guess it would be Chris, shared, hope is there, we're just maybe looking in the wrong place for it. And that reality helps me to cast a vision for the next chapter in our faith's life. I think that our hope comes from deep within the seeds of Unitarian Universalism. So stick with me because I was raised Unitarian Universalist, this is the only religion I have ever known. I do not identify as a Unitarian Universalist Christian or a UU atheist or anything like that. Beliefs are how we make sense of our experiences, and my beliefs will change when my life changes. But my religion, this one that allows me to explore my beliefs, that doesn't change. I mean, it does change over time, but conceptually, theologically, it doesn't for me. I grew up in the crest of the humanist wave in our faith. I did not grow up in a church. The church I grew up in called themselves a society. We did not have prayer. We had meditation because that felt a little safer than prayer, I imagine. We probably wouldn't even call them hymns. Do you know we did this at this church too? That was not the sanctuary. That was the assembly room. There was a long time where Unitarian Universalists were very clearly in that let's not sound religious. But we did anything we could do to avoid naming ourselves as the religion that comes out of Jesus' ministry. And I know that that religion worked for many of my parents' and grandparents' generation. I know that that manifestation of our faith helped them to make sense of the world. But as a child out in the real world, it utterly failed me. The propensity to avoid anything that could sound like any of the religious people that we were trying so hard to separate ourselves from, that left me unable to articulate this life-changing faith to many of my family and friends who might have needed it. It cut me and us off from the people who might have been a part of this faith. And why? Most of my ministry, I've been accused of being Christian or too Christian. And this is weird because I do not think that Jesus was killed for our sins. I do not think he ascended to heaven or that he was even Christ. No, the only religion I know is this religion, and it would not be here were it not for the human Jesus. Jesus was a man who saw people on the margins. He saw people that traditional religion, his religion, considered unworthy. He saw people who were being hurt and killed by the state, especially when the state united itself with the empire. And I'm saying this as someone who serves in a state that has just mandated the Ten Commandments be placed in the schools. And not the Ten Commandments, one legislator's interpretation of the Ten Commandments. Jesus was a religious man who saw the way that this faith, his faith, was used to hurt, to kill, to marginalize, and to consolidate power. If you read the Gospels, Jesus did not believe he was God. Certainly not in Mark. It gets a little more gaudy the closer to John you get, but not in Mark. He did not believe in the Trinity. That was voted in about a few hundred years later. And he did not believe in hell, with the exception of this weird thing where he's actually talking about a garbage dump, but that's a whole other sermon for a different day. So what do you call a religion centered around the idea that there is no hell, that God is one, and that love and justice should always be more important than empire, tradition, and status quo? I know that many of us have worked hard to distance ourselves from our Christian roots. And while this religion allows us to form our own beliefs based on our own experiences, one of the strengths of this faith, we trace our heritage back to the Congregationalists in white New England, who trace their roots back to the white Puritans, who trace their roots back to the Protestant Reformation, who trace their roots back through when Catholicism became a tool of the empire, who trace their roots back to the earliest churches based on a man who was killed for saying that love of God and neighbor was more important than any religious dogma or rule of empire. I feel like when Jesus became Christ and Christianity became the religion of the empire, our faith was taken from us. Do you know the early Unitarians were voted out at the Council of Nicaea because they dared to say that Jesus was human? Unitarian Universalists love to identify ourselves as on the fringe. We love to think about how little power we have. I see it in churches all the time where this church is good about that, but churches will undermine themselves in worship to sort of prove we do not have as much power as we do. We love to pretend that we're just the weirdos on the corner and that no one will love us. And it's just not true. Disingenuinely so. If you have never been to Boston or the Northeast as someone on a Unitarian Universalist religious pilgrimage, I would encourage. Who has done that? Who has gone to Boston to look at the Unitarian stuff? It's a pretty interesting experience. The religion is everywhere up there, not just in the churches, but manifested in the government. We are intimately and intrinsically tied up with the American story. The revolution happened in many of the churches that would later become Unitarian Universalists because this faith believed that the gathered people could govern themselves. And the stories of this country are the stories of our faith. Unitarians, for example, did not love slavery, but they sure benefited from it financially. Many of our churches up in New England have endowments full of money that came out of the slave trade. All of the cognitive dissonance that you may experience about this country and how it does and does not tell certain stories, those are also the Unitarian Universalist stories. I feel this especially pronounced serving and being from the South, a place where this country's racism is loudest, not to say anything of the impacts of environmental degradation, the weather traumas, the poverty. And I feel pulled away from so many in our faith, not because of the rhetoric, but because we are so far separated from Unitarian Massachusetts by design of this country. We love to tell stories about how much we value diversity and inclusion, but we go out of our way to separate ourselves from just about everyone we consider other. And that includes black people and immigrants and poor people and people without degrees and conservatives. Also, this is a little more towards Emerson than you. Y'all have been doing pretty good at that. But as in general, we as a religious people love to separate ourselves from everyone that we've deemed as not worthy. This religion has always had and cultivated the idea of us as elitists at the expense of everyone else. The thing we are doing today is as deep-rooted and important as almost anything in the installation is as deep-rooted and important as almost anything in our faith. And I would like for you to think of every other Unitarian Universalist church that are able enough, rich enough, competent enough, and lucky enough to have professional ministry. And think about all of those who are willing to invite this minister in and to have a ritual celebrating this next chapter in your life, their life. Are y'all good so far? Good. So where is the hope? Until we can name where we are, we can't get to hope because proper diagnosis determines treatment. So let's start with the misery list because there's nothing that makes people happier at a celebratory installation than misery. I was having a conversation with some colleagues last week, and they said only jokingly enough to give enough sugar to swallow the pill, that they will continue to do the work even if it means they wind up in a camp for doing it. Now, I am well used to hyperbolic Unitarian Universalists, but this did not feel like typical hyperbolic fear. I voted this past week, and I felt a weird sense of foreboding. Did anyone else feel that? Okay, so it's not just me. In Louisiana and in Texas, in some ways it doesn't matter who wins the election because here the climate is dangerous for so many people on the margins. On top of that, we seem to be one of the few faiths that I know of that is taking the existential threat of climate change seriously. How many of you have had questions in your mind about whether or not your children or your grandchildren can grow up in the city that you want them to grow up in safely? Do many of you see a path forward in the next few years for women or trans people to have autonomy over their own bodies? I should word that as the negative. Well, I asked you to do do you feel this is terrible? And you said, yes. This is terrible. And you said, yes. Do you feel this is not terrible? And all right. And you may not know me if I was there, but I know this church. I was a colleague, and this is important to know about Emerson. They had a married couple serving the church, Mark and Becky. Mark died suddenly of a heart attack in 2016. I was colleagues with Mark and Becky who served here. I drove up from Baton Rouge for Mark's memorial service. I knew Hurricane Harvey because it almost came to Baton Rouge right before it flooded many of you. I had family in Houston when the freeze in 21 took out your power for days. We lost it for 18 days when we had 18 hours, when we had little kids, and now I know it was just 18 hours, but at the time I didn't know it. So here's what we need to do, and here's where I see the hope. Because I know I tend to ramble, I've made a list of 4 things we need to do in order to have Unitarian Universalism after the azaleas died. 2 of them are things to get us ready, and 2 of them are a vision for us going forward. They are 1, know what you can and cannot do. 2, dig $10 holes. 3, see the world as it actually is. And 4 is let your light shine. Now 4 should have been let's fly away, but they went ahead and changed the song. So you're going to have to pretend for part 4 that we're doing whatever the song they're doing and not the song that I wanted them to do. But they didn't know it because apparently it's a Louisiana song. I mean, it's from Oklahoma, but anyway, those are the 4. So 1, we have to be very clear about what we can and what we cannot control. Unitarian Universalists love to think that we are in control of everything, but we are not. We have never been and we never will be. It is important to separate out the question of what you can do and what you can't. Can you control hurricanes? Can you control who is elected? Not entirely. Can you control the drought that happened last summer? But could I have adapted and watered my azaleas? The second thing is to set things up right. Ever since that azalea disaster, I have been trying to be a better steward of my plants. In my research, there's one sentence that has floated around in my head over and over and over, and it leads us to number 2 of the 4. And I don't want you to hear it yet, congregation, because I was going to do a whole sermon on this later. So just ignore it for now, but we're still going to go through it. It is better to put a 10-cent plant in a $10 hole than it is to put a $10 plant in a 10-cent hole. Does that make sense? Better to have a $10 hole with a 10-cent plant than a $10 plant in a 10-cent hole. So let me unpack that. You can buy the nicest plant. You can build the nicest building. You can bring in the best minister. I'm talking about Ed. But it will not work if you don't do the infrastructure work. I bought a persimmon tree that I was very excited about. I dug a hole in the backyard. Now, partially there was a lot of heavy clay, and partially there were giant sycamore roots that made digging almost impossible. But I did not fully put that plant in the ground, and it has struggled for the last 7 or 8 years. Some of the roots are kind of sticking up over the ground, and poor little sad trees keep trying to grow up out of the roots. You see, I dug a 10-cent hole for my $10 plant. More recently, in front of my azaleas, I've spent quite a few weeks scouting out the land and watching where the sun and the water go. Once it was time, I laid out cardboard to kill the grass under where I wanted to plant the stuff. Then I brought in fresh soil and compost over and over and over until I dug a little trench that I was very proud of that had a place for the water to go and so the grass wouldn't be able to cross it. And I did all of this so that the infrastructure for my plants would be better. Now I have a garden that has zinnias and sunflowers and green beans and okra and mustard greens and strawberries and so much more right in the front of the house. And because I did the prep work and I trusted the plants to know what they were supposed to do, they're doing better than that poor persimmon in the back did. And they're doing well amidst our next drought. Do y'all know the last time it rained? It's like September 15th or so. You can buy all of the right things for this religion. You can buy enough hymnals. You can buy the right tech. You can buy a nice building. They have a nice building, by the way, so this is me poking at them a little. You can do all of the things to get the fanciest, nicest plant, but if you are not intentional with the infrastructure work for us as a religious people, it will not go well. You can have the best minister in the world. See, I'm lifting up their minister. But if you as individuals are not doing the work to take care of yourselves, to be spiritually healthy, you're putting a $10 plant in a 10-cent hole. Ministries do not live or die from the pulpit. They live and die in the relationships. And while a president and a board are incredibly important, ministries are most often undermined by the parking lot conversations. They can be undermined by how little Unitarian Universalists trust each other and trust our clergy. The Baton Rouge Church is actually very nice to each other. I say they, you care for each other. I don't have to worry after a sermon about nitpicky comments or a decision that questions my leadership or a decision of the staff or the leaders. You don't undermine everyone else all of the time. And because of that, when you do give me or the staff or leaders feedback, it's easy for us to hear and to adapt to. The only way your ministry will be successful is if you do the work individually as church members, not just the leaders. So let me be more specific. And this is as good for you as for them. Go to therapy. Take care of your bodies. Practice being welcoming and forgiving to everyone you know. Do that work on yourself. Part of the thing about being a $10 hole is you spend most of your time and energy setting the plant up for success. You give it the support it needs among the elements, and then you let it do what it's supposed to do. The Ten Commandments law that is right now put in, I'm going to have to point this way because I'll be in Houston, that is put in place in Louisiana, it is being challenged by a UU minister and a family in this church, and all of that work came out of this congregation. Last month, in response to this month, but next week it'll be last month, in response to the horrific anti-trans laws Louisiana passed, this church held a giant queer music festival, and it was a huge success. They're not going to clap, but you can clap. Both of those grew, but not because I made it happen. It's because the church had done the tending work to create a healthy enough congregation for it to come out organically. Third, and here comes the casting the vision part. We have to see the world as it actually is. If we learned nothing else from the COVID shutdowns, it was that when people feel unsafe, they will back into the same patterns they have done all of the time. And for many people down here, that meant making it partisan and pretending it didn't exist. These are patterns of learned behavior to find safety. The same people who are pushing these anti-trans, anti-women, anti-poor, the list of all of the things, these are the same people who are pushing these ideologies, are the same people who are being crushed by them. And it can feel good for us to rage about climate change, to rage at the drought, to continue to ignore watering my plants. But we have to change, we have to adapt, and we have to embrace this new world. I cannot keep assuming my azaleas can live in a world anymore without my watch and support. Similarly, we cannot keep doing our religion the same old way. We cannot keep othering ourselves. We cannot afford to separate ourselves from the same people who are being crushed and being suffocated by these different theologies. We cannot keep holding on to this identity of us as the power elites, but somehow us with no power. We have to let go of this idea that only the intellectual, only the educated, only those who are lucky, only the white, only the liberal can have this faith. That means loving and supporting each other, and especially this minister. It means loving and thanking the past, but not being dragged along by it. It means doing the work that we need to do to figure out why our churches look so white. And it doesn't happen just with the leaders. Every one of us has to understand where we are in the world and what our culpability is. And it means seeing this faith for what it actually is. This is a religion with deep roots that have always strived to prioritize love and justice over empire and division. I'm not suggesting we become Christians because making Jesus into Christ robbed him of his humanity. But I am suggesting that we re-embrace the very same understanding of the world that gave birth to this faith. Part of the reason, I'm going to cross out this part because y'all don't need to hear that, neither do they. Part of the reason that this faith failed me out in the world as a child is because the religious folks who raised me pretended like we were somehow set apart and different from everyone else. This religion, when we see it, as it truly is, can give us all of the theological language to be the counterbalance to all of the ways that faith has been used as a bludgeon and a fuel for insurrection and division and violence. Fourth is to let your light shine. We do not need to know how the story ends. We cannot know how the story ends. Pretending we have all the answers or all the predictions, that shows a staggering lack of humility. We're just people. So instead of us spending all of our energy fretting about what we don't know will come, we have to spend time to know ourselves. We must go back to the origins of this faith, which said that there is nothing empire can do to kill hope or to kill love or to kill justice. They even killed the messenger, but not the message. Each of us is a seed in waiting. The church is a seed in waiting. We don't need to make it grow. We need to do our work to set it right and then trust that it knows what to do. In the same way, each of you has a piece of divine within you, and our task as a religious people is to create the ideal environment for all of us to thrive, even the people we work so hard to separate ourselves from. Because those other people out there, the ones we aren't like, they are us. You have to know that it is of the utmost importance that you love the hell out of God and of your neighbors and of yourself. Always know that you are worthy. Amen. So let's sing our closing hymn, which is the one I wanted us to sing. I invite you to rise if your body lets you.
Some bright morning when this life is over, I'll fly away to that home on God's celestial shore. I'll fly away. I'll fly away, oh glory. I'll fly away. When I die, hallelujah, by and by, I'll fly away. When the shadows of this life have gone, I'll fly away. Like a bird from these prison walls I'll fly. I'll fly away. I'll fly away, oh glory. I'll fly away. When I die, hallelujah, by and by, I'll fly away. Oh, how glad and happy when we meet. I'll fly away. No more cold iron shackles on my feet. I'll fly away. I'll fly away, oh glory. I'll fly away. When I die, hallelujah, by and by, I'll fly away. Just a few more weary days and then I'll fly away. No more where our joys that never end. I'll fly away. I'll fly away, oh glory. I'll fly away. When I die, hallelujah, by and by, I'll fly away.
for the benediction, to know what that song's about from a Unitarian Universalist perspective, we can let this old life die, the one that tells you you're not worthy or you're not good enough. Because the land where joy will never end is right here if we can go make it happen. Love the hell out of this world. Go in peace, go in love. Amen.